We're going to get started. A little history. About 20-some years ago, we learned that there was a significant number of Detroit Tiger fans in the Jamestown area, motivated by the fact that Dan Lanetta was a Jamestown native, a good friend, but also director of minor league operations at the time with the Detroit Tigers. He would come back occasionally to play golf. And so we took that opportunity to gather at my house for basically a Lanetta lunch, a Tiger talk, and it took on a life of its own. Over time, we had the benefit and privilege to bring in the likes of Willie Horton and Lance Parrish, Hal Narragon, Fred Sherman, some folks who floated through the area who had Tiger connections and played, and we just had a lot of fun doing so. So a couple of weeks ago, my good friend who's sitting up there, the Grand Poobah, the ultimate P.T. Barnum of all things Buffalo baseball, Mike Bellani, was calling me to get the background on something of an event we had a couple weeks ago. And he said, by the way, have you ever interviewed Bill Scherrer? And I said, no, I hadn't. So I'm driving, Mike's driving. Visualize this. And so we're chit-chatting a little bit about Bill's bio, and Mike's reminded me, this is the real deal. This isn't just a guy who had a cup of coffee with the Tigers. World Series ring of the 1984, this is the real deal. I said, man, we got to get Bill here while he's here. He goes, let me find out about his availability. So I thought I expected a call back. No, 30 seconds later, there's Bill on the phone. So Mike, while he's driving, somehow conferences Bill in. Bill's telling war stories right away. As for those who sat out there before this, know that Bill's pretty shy. And so as a result, he fired up, and I said, here we are, let's do it. So today's the day. Gathering of the Detroit Tiger faithful and others. So for those who are others, you are on the A-list. You're on the A-list of baseball people that we felt it was important to have here. Now I just want to spend just a moment in silence, because we did lose one of our faithful, Don Weaver. And Don was one of the guys who always showed up for the Tigers. So we'll just have a second for the group just to pause in remembrance of Don. Thank you. Also, we are blessed today, a rare moment that we have in our midst. Not one, not two, but three major leaguers. It's right here, one place, one time. And if you were here a little bit earlier, they were sharing the war stories among themselves. Wish time permitted to have a panel, because this could go until tomorrow. There's no question. And so we have Dave Kershone. Dave Kershone, who played with the Baltimore Orioles in 1977. And most importantly, it's on YouTube, his big major league home run, which was a walk-off home run against something called the Milwaukee Brewers back in 1977. And that was a magic moment for Dave, certainly a magic moment for us in Chautauqua County, and Dave's up in Dunkirk, New York. We also have in our midst Tom Tellman. Tom is from Warren, Pennsylvania, and his major league debut was June of 1979. His last appearance was June of 1985. And during that time period, he was with the San Diego Padres, Milwaukee Brewers, Oakland Athletics, and Tom Tellman is a professional storyteller also. And trust me, time does not permit him and Bill and Dave to be at the same place at the same time, as I mentioned. But Tom is on tape, on video, as is David. David's war stories are on YouTube, so courtesy of YouTube, Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, and the Tarp Skunks, we've captured some of that. Speaking of the Tarp Skunks, we have Christian Doltz here. Christian's there. He's got the schedules, which are out, which you can pick up on the way out. Before I forget, we spent a lot of money getting Bill here today, and we also spent more money to get him to sign some items, which has his cards on a poster out there. And should we get caught up afterwards or you have to leave early, they're on the table. Please grab them. They're for you. And so we thank you, Bill, for spending.
You can see them at the post office, too.
Yeah, for that time. In order to wrap our heads around Bill Scherrer, I'm going to show 2 videos, then I'll call Bill up, and then I'll just get out of the way. The first one is, as you may know, Bill is a member of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame, a huge honor. And we're going to show the video they showed to give you a sense of Bill Scherrer.
After a brilliant baseball career at Cardinal O'Hara High School, which brought him national honors, Bill Scherrer signed a major league contract with the Cincinnati Reds, and by 1983, he was the Reds' top relief pitcher. He was traded to the Detroit Tigers in 1984 and was a big contributor as the Tigers won the World Series, beating the San Diego Padres. Bill spent parts of 7 seasons in the majors, including stops in Baltimore and Philadelphia. His career highlights include 228 relief appearances, 311 innings, 207 strikeouts, 11 saves, and was the last pitcher that Johnny Bench caught in his last game as a catcher, striking out all 3 batters faced. Upon retirement, Bill joined the ranks of notable Major League scouts from Western New York. He joined the Florida Marlins in 1992, earned a 2nd World Series ring as a member of that team's scouting staff in 1997. Scherrer's efforts for the Marlins were recognized with the first annual Scout of the Year award by the Toronto Sun in 1994. Bill returned to Cincinnati as a national scout from 98 to 2002. He moved to the Chicago White Sox then, and as an assistant to the general manager, earned his 3rd ring in 2005. He maintains local ties not only by his residence, but as an instructor at the Rick Lancelotti Buffalo School of Baseball. A proud Buffalonian, Scherrer tonight becomes another thread in the rich fabric of Buffalo baseball. Bill Scherrer, forever enshrined in the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame.
Bill. And in order to set the scene for our interview, as was mentioned, Bill was a member of the 1984 World Champion Detroit Tigers. For us Tiger folks, this is the last time, and they were the champions. So when I go to Detroit there, it's always 2 years. It's 68 and 84. 68 and 84. I mean, other than that, there are just a bunch of years. But other than that, that's where he plays. And Bill was part of that. However, he pitched in 3 World Series games, and he also pitched in the 5th and final game. Now, I just want to show a little bit of a highlight of an interview I did concerning the 5th and final game. And after that's over, Bill, I'm going to have you sit right where your sweater is, and then we'll start our interview. And so it's an interview we did, which at the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, Randy Anderson's here, who's the president. One of the invited guests that night was a guy named Goose Gossage. So we had a chance to interview Goose about something you'll see right now. Talking to Kurt Gibson because they'd mic'd up the managers.
Right.
Tell me about that. It's such a great byplay.
Well, we got to back up a few innings. About the second inning of the ball game in Detroit. It was game 5, and so I just pop out in the dugout. You know, I've been up in the clubhouse, kind of getting ready and ready to go down and get in the bullpen, and I come out and Gibson's up, and I just pop out into the dugout. Tim Lawler, a left-handed pitcher, is standing there. He's probably my best friend on the team, and he said, "Hey, how'd Gibby do against you?" I said, "I own him." It just jumped out of my mouth, you know, and I never said anything like, never even, you know, if I had success against a guy, just, you know, don't wake up a dead horse, you know, or whatever, you know, don't wake him up, you know, and just leave it alone. And it just flew out of my mouth. I own him. Well, if I faced Gibson, and I did own him, and he'll even say it, if I faced him, and the statistics read something like this, if I faced him 50 times, I struck him out 49 times. Really, it's that crazy. It's that it's exactly that. And I think he made contact one time with the ball, and that was it. And so now, fast forward into the, ninth inning or eighth inning or whatever, eighth inning, I guess it was, bottom of the eighth, and Gibby, here comes Gibby, and Dick Williams is going 4. Put him on, like this from the dugout, and Terry Kennedy gives me 4 like that, and I'm going, no. I said, no, I don't want to walk him, I don't want to walk him. And Terry's looking over at Dick, and Dick's going like this, and I'm going, no. So all of a sudden, somebody called timeout, Kennedy or somebody, Dick, I think, called timeout, and he comes running out.
Troy took 3 of the first 4 against the Padres. In Game 5, the Bengals led by a run in the 8th as Kirk Gibson came up with runners on 2nd and 3rd to face a pitcher who didn't want to walk the bases full, Goose Gossage.
You want the infield in on him? No.
He don't want to walk you. He don't want to walk you.
Fastball pitcher against fastball hitter in a classic confrontation. Kirk Gibson's devastating blast, his second home run of the game, staked the Tigers to an 8-4 victory, providing Detroit with a 4th World Championship in the 84-year history of the franchise. A decisive finish to the year of the Tiger.
And he said, well, he doesn't want to walk him. I said, no, I want to go after him. I said, let's go after him. He goes, okay, all right. He says, go after him. Next pitch, in the upper deck. Shit. Should have walked him.
Well, you just saw that highlight of the 1984, which is shown over and over. Certainly Gibson's hands over his head. That's the iconic picture of 84. You're in the dugout. You saw some of this play out.
Well, yeah, I was, it's funny, poor Petrie struggled. And, like I said, Sparky's not a patient man except with Morris. So it was back and forth. We had the bullpen up and down, and we knew it was Game 5. And he gave up another run, so I'm in the game facing Wynn, which I was blessed because I hung him a curveball and Gibby got to the warning track and made the play. So then there you got Kennedy, you got Nettles, Garvey hit a bullet to Chet, so Chet got the first out, and then I gave up a hit. So I got 2 turtles up. They both can't run. And I actually eventually played with Terry Kennedy, and Kennedy hit a little ground ball back to me, which, Tram's already out there. I mean, I could have drop kicked it and thrown it to second and thrown to first, but instead I panicked. So I threw it over to Darrell Evans. So even Sparky came out. Did you have a hard time getting out of your glove? I said, no, I just wanted to get the Scherrer out. You're out of the game. Lopey's in the game. Well, the story is that if I would have got the out, not that it matters, I would have been the winning pitcher. Because, both of them can't run, and if I threw the ball right directly to Tram, it's a double play, and then obviously Lopey would have came in. And Lopey, people don't realize how good Lopez was. Willie deserves all the credit. We know he's Cy Young and MVP and super year, Willie. But Lopey were people who don't really appreciate it, which I do. And I played with some pretty good pitchers in Cincinnati. You talk about Jack Morris. Well, I thought Mario Soto at one time was as good as anybody in major. We just couldn't score. But Lopez, unfortunately, Lopez passed, and he wasn't at the 40-year anniversary. But he doesn't get enough credit from that team. And I laugh about today's era when we talk about, boy, that guy pitched a lot, 90 innings. He did. Lopey pitched 137 innings, and Willie Hernandez pitched 140 to relievers. Now, we're not talking about Mike Marshall. That's another story in itself, what he did. But today's game is watching those guys. I wouldn't trade places for anybody. And I had the opportunity to scout this for 20 years with the White Sox, all the major leagues. I appreciate their abilities, but I do not appreciate how they play the game. And we were all blessed Tommy and myself, to play with guys who taught us how to play. Run balls out, don't assume. Hit your cutoff, hit and run, bunt. I mean, I smoke. So I don't give a shit if Jeter's in the game or not. I said, let's get this game going because I don't care. You can throw me out of the game because I'm going to smoke. I'm not waiting 4 hours to watch this game end. So again, to watch and appreciate what the Tigers did, and especially for me, be traded over from Cincinnati, I was just lucky enough not to screw it up.
So talk about, though, that with the Gibson moment. Were you sitting on the bench at the time, or were you in the
Well,
shop?
I was sitting on the bench, but nobody wanted to get near Gibby because you see him running through first. He must have broke the first baseman's hand because as strong as Gibby is. So you just wanted to go like this and not get near him because he would take you out. His football mentality came into play. So, yeah, and we're remembered for Gibby now more because of what the Dodger thing is for sure. But I'm very happy to play with a guy like him, boy. He gave everything else he could give on it, boy. And if you didn't play hard for Gibby, he'd take you back into the locker room. He didn't give a shit whether you were skinny or big. He didn't care. He was a true winner.
So in anticipation of this event, did some research on you, Bill, but most importantly, went on eBay and found something that I don't even know anybody had ever seen. These are baseball discs right here, okay? Baseball discs by a bakery company called Cane's. But it happened to be when the 1984 World Champion. So I'm going to give you these discs as a gift. But before that,
You got
walk
Chet
away.
Lemon, you got Chester on
well,
that
you're
thing,
gonna you're gonna look at each name and you're gonna tell me something about each of those guys. Okay?
Oh, I'll be kind with this because I'm not going to get into.
Well, it is being taped. I just want you to know that.
Okay,
Just
good.
a
Thank
reminder.
you.
So
Chet Lemon. I really like Chet a lot. It's not really getting back because Chet's unfortunately fighting for his life, and it was nice seeing him at the 40th anniversary. But it's the first time I really knew about Jehovah's Witness, and him and Lou. And we used to laugh about, we'd be sitting at the bar, typical me, or Gibby didn't really drink much, but it would always be either Evans or all of us. And, they would praise the Lord, and we'd see the two of them come out of their rooms with their hair looked like God named Mott the Hoople. It was like this. Boy, I used to tell Chester, praise the Lord, Chester, praise the Lord. So I think of him in a good way. But Chet was, and again, here's another guy I will also say about him too. He's not appreciated how good a center fielder he was. And I was blessed to play with Eric Davis and a few other great ones too. But, when you start looking at his stats, as good as that team was with Lance and Tram and Lou and all the rest, I think he's underrated. Really, really great player. Willie Hernandez, as Doug Barry used to call him, the Queen. And the reason he was the Queen, and I love Willie. Willie, unfortunately, has passed us now too. I'm sorry, Willie. But when he got the Cy Young, and we were really good, won the World Series. 85 was a different world, and he would never come down to the bullpen. So then Doug Bear would always call him the Queen, because before he was the King. Well, the King's no longer existing. He wasn't as successful as he was in 85. So, but I think of Willie, first thing that comes out of my mouth is very seldom this will ever happen. A Cy Young and an MVP in the same year. Good man, too. One of my good friends, Tommy Brookins, lives in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and he'll never change. Cuts down trees, and unfortunately, just recently, a tree fell on him. So he's doing all right, but he was in ICU and everything else. So somebody made a comment to me on the phone because it came from Detroit. Did you hear about Brookie? And I said, I stay in contact with him, once, 2 weeks. And somebody goes, isn't he too old to be cutting trees? And I was telling Brookie that story. And I said, you got to understand, he's a mountain man. He goes out and cuts trees. He's not paying anybody to do this. Unfortunately, it twisted and it didn't land on his brother. It landed on him. So I said, but if there's anybody that is salt of the earth, a lunch pail kind of guy, and he is, nobody knows this, Tommy Brookins caught one game in Major League Baseball because everybody was hurt. And who did he throw to? Me, and we got the win. So Tommy Brookins' only catching game was him and me. So I said, Brookie, you're my favorite catcher. Larry Herndon, quiet man, superhuman being. There's not much I can say. You got to remember, I was there in 84 and was there in 86. So these guys, all my career was basically in Cincinnati. So to be these guys opened arms with me and almost made me feel like I came up with Detroit. But he was one of the salt of the earth, very quiet human being, but a class act. Another guy, sweet swinging Johnny Grubb, a quality guy. I mean, this was a good, one thing Sparky doesn't get credit for, he really deals with makeup. You got to remember, I had all three managers. I had George Scherrer, who managed Sparky Anderson. Sparky Anderson managed Pete Rose. I had George Scherrer, I had Sparky, and I had Pete. And so all the connecting dots. So if they knew what you were in the locker room, you could have all the ability in the world, but with Sparky, it had to work and mesh. So with Sparky, he had the great core of the players, but he needed the makeups of guys like Larry Herndon, guys like Johnny Grubb, guys like Rusty Kuntz. They knew their roles. If we didn't know our roles, well, that's why I played a lot of years in the minor leagues. I just didn't get it right too often. But in that particular time, Sparky got recommended to get me over to Detroit because of George Scherrer. And George Scherrer was an old Dutchman, so he wasn't going to listen to any one of my stories. So, but again, Johnny Grubb's another class act. Darrell Evans, he talks more than I do. So if Darrell and me are on the phone, it's at least 2 or 3 hours. And if you smoke, go out and have a cigarette now because you're going to have another hour before the other cigarette because we can talk. Another great guy, another guy that's underappreciated. 414 home runs and another true professional. So, I mean, these are great guys. Juan Burrito, I said Burrito. Juan could go on the mound. He just had to take a step backward because he'd fart and burp and everything else because he drank so much the night before with all of us. So Juan is another class guy.
Juan Berenguer.
Juan Berenguer. No, he was, senior smoker. He could drink too. I used to drink with all those guys and they were, well, I'm not going to get there. But anyway, Doug Bear, another. Again, these are quality human beings. I can tell you all about the stories and everything else, but I can't tell you one bad guy on that Tiger team that I'd say, what a jerk. One of those egomaniacs. I'm not going to bring up Mike Schmidt, but I probably will. An egomaniac that blamed everybody else except himself. And good leaders take control of their team. So I hope I didn't say anything against anybody who liked Mike Schmidt. Lou Whitaker, sweet Lou, Hall of Famer. Now, I say Hall of Famer because I'm a little biased. But when they came up with WAR, and I don't understand WAR or some of these analytical numbers either, they came up with anything over 70 and above you consider a Hall of Famer. Lou 75. And I'm taking nothing away from Ryan Sandberg. I went through the minors, played against him in the big leagues. Great player, Hall of Famer. Lou Whitaker can't even get votes. Now, I'm sure if he was in New York or Chicago, he'd be first-time ballot. So I'm biased, not like I am biased with David Concepcion, the only one of the few Red Machine guys that did make the Hall of Fame. So I'm sort of getting too connected with that. But Lou Whitaker, for me personally, is a Hall of Fame guy. So, and a lot of people who came to Detroit, you think that they came to see Alan Trammell, because I heard from a lot of the writers, they said the first guy they wanted to see that was the priority guy was Lou Whitaker on that team. Lance Parris, I just talked to him last week, big wheel. I mean, he's another guy. He's not a Hall of Famer, but a great career. And so another good friend that I seem to stay in contact with as well. So
We had Lance here, and one of the things that he talked about was he was one of the first, and at the time it was discouraged of weightlifting. I mean, Lance would work out, and Sparky and others said, you can't, you shouldn't,
Right.
but he did it anyways. Was that a conversation at all
well,
on the team?
I can only say, we're talking about Milwaukee, when I gave up 5 earned runs in the 9th inning. It was one of the top 6 of the worst traumatic losses in Detroit. And I went back in the locker room, and those guys after the game would lift. So it would be Lance and Brookie and those guys. And so I said, what were you doing? I said, I was trying to have a beer. I was just waiting for the son of a bitches and get out of here. I'm not touching no weights with those idiots. But they lift diligently. And so when I'm not going to go back to where Lance started, like some of these guys that came up through the system, he was big on strength and muscles. And, some guys, as we talked about getting Rusty Gates, and some guys, we were talking about a guy I came up with, Paul Householder, it went the other way. He got too tight. Where in the case of Lance, I got to say it benefited him. So, I mean, nothing against Sparky, but if you can perform and you're not losing what Lance did, Sparky, you just blow Sparky off. Now your head. Thanks, Coach. Thanks. Alan Trammell, another guy. I mean, I always said about Alan, it always comes to mind, I said, if you sort of like when I saw Josh Allen at Wyoming, I said, somebody told me the AD at Wyoming, I said, if you think he's a really good quarterback, he's a better person. Well, guess what? Alan Trammell is a better person than he was a player. So you never hear him talk about how great he is. You never hear him, just goes about his business, true professional. And so Not much to say negative on Alan Trammell. Danny Petrie, he again probably doesn't get enough credit probably because of Jack. Jack was so big and so dynamic, and we talk about how many World Series he won with Toronto and Minnesota. And Peaches was really, really good. But another guy that went after the ball game, it would be either Walt Terrell, myself, him, having our beers, watching a movie. It'd almost be like somebody would say, he's like what your daughter want to marry. It's Danny Petrie. You know, maybe too nice of a guy. Too nice of a guy. Jack Morris, I'm not even going to get into this. I mean, he's such a happy-go-lucky guy. Miserable. But a good guy. We used to laugh at him. Even the 40th anniversary, I said, Jack is just never going to have a smile, never happy, never. But you know what? In all essence, if I start looking at I told somebody one time the story, I said, you're never going to take him out of the game. I said, Sparky would have to jaws of life to get the ball out. But I will say, and we talked about Jack Morris earlier, he would pitch a 9-8 game and win, no different than a 1-0 game. In this era today, he would be like what Gossage did. Get back in the dugout. You got no chance of taking this ball out of my hand. And it wouldn't be a pitch count, with all the Gumbers say 100, and they give each other a hand and give each other hugs after 4 innings. Boy, God, I would have been good after 4. Unfortunately, I had to go 5 and 6, and I gave up 7 runs. But this is a different era. So guys like when they say they don't, well, we still have Verlander. We still have guys that still go 7, 8, 9, and if they feel good, let them go. Use instincts. But that isn't always the case. But again, as a fierce competitor and a winner, there's no comparison. Jack Morris is he's a Hall of Famer. Kirk Gibson, another happy-go-lucky guy. But I'll tell you one thing. Like I said before we started this, a fierce competitor, a gamer. He worked at it, couldn't throw. He ran like a deer. He'd run like a choo-choo. So you know how the guys will run through the bag and you get the bag and you stop and you don't want to run the guy over? Gibby would have put you in row 5 because that's how he played. But he got anything about Kirk Gibson, he got every ounce of his ability besides what he did in the dramatic home run against Gossage and obviously the Dodgers. But another guy, his nickname would probably be me personally, a winner. Who's this? Milt Wilcox. He's running dogs now. So Milt, good guy. In other words, there's nothing really to talk about. Milt Wilcox and me were together when they gave out the World Series rings, and I know that was the first question somebody asked me about my ring. And I'm not into jewelry, so it doesn't really make any difference to me anyway. So when they gave us our rings, mine was a little tarnished. I don't care really, but so our P.O. DeSalvo was our trainer. He goes, yours look, let me polish this up. Didn't go away. So all we're wearing our rings. We're in California. And girls know everything about furs and rings. They do. That's just the way it is. So she looked at mine. She goes, yours look different. And I said, well, and I'm almost backpedaling. So here's Lance and there's Gibby and then more. We're all having our drinks. And so Bill LaJoy at the time was a GM, and he was then on the road with us. And I said, I came in and knocked on the door. I said, just tell me the truth. I just want to know. It doesn't really matter, but just tell me. Don't lie to me. Did you give me a bootleg ring? And he goes, we got to win games in 85. I said, well, no, we know we got to win games. He didn't really make a comment. So the next trip, we were going to Seattle. And Vern Smorganoff was a writer in Detroit, but he's unfortunately passed. And Milt Wilcox, when I think of Milt was with us. We were at the Red Robin. And we were telling him about the story. Now, Milt is there. He goes, oh, you didn't tell Vern. And Vern's like, he goes, oh, my God. He goes, I'll pay for the appraisal. So we went to a jeweler. The jeweler's got this down here. And he's not looking at the insignia, World Series champs, your foot number and everything else. He just pulled up. He goes, is this a high school ring? And now, if he could have got his typewriter and he couldn't wait to get on the phone, he's like this the whole time. He's calling Jim Campbell. I go, did you give Bill Scherrer a fake World Series ring? And he goes, oh, he'd be back. Though his line was, they gave me a third of a share, so they gave me a third of a ring. Well, the Tigers were super to me. I was only there from August 29th, and yes, I pitched in the playoffs. There were 18 games in September, but they were overly fair. So when it came down to it, they didn't say anything else. Well, found out later, the rings that the Tigers got, and I don't want to be talking cheap because they were super to us this recently in the last 40th anniversary. they came out with the Padres rings were worth more than the Tigers rings, and San Diego was the National League champion. We were the World Series winners. So everybody ran to the jewelers. Now, I don't mean to laugh, because I didn't give a shit at that time. I really didn't care. I said, just be honest. So they came out with our rings were worth $3,700. Theirs were worth like about $5,000. At that time, obviously, it was a lot of money. So years go by, and that was a question somebody asked me, and one of those questions and answers was in Detroit. I said, I know that's going to come up, so it's all right with me. But I told the story. I said, I've been blessed to have 3 World Series rings. Obviously, with the Marlins in '97, White Sox in '05. I count my Indianapolis ring in '82, it's just as much. But I gave it to my dad, and he wore it. And he just, Jesus, Dad. I said, I walk in the hospital, I'm looking at it, and I got the real World Series ring with the White Sox. He gave us all the World Series rings, diamonds and everything else. And he goes, yeah, that's a nice ring. I said, yeah, it is a nice ring. He goes, but it's not as nice as this. So I said, what's the fable of that story? I said, it's not the value, it's what it meant. And so to me, I didn't get through the jewelry. I don't wear it. I told my kids, keep it. Just like my house, keep them. I don't want them. I could live in a double wide easy. I did that my whole life. We were in the minor leagues. So I guess they told the story. The fable of the story is, it's to him because of the World Series, not necessarily the value of the ring itself. So it's a good story for me, at least. Bill Wilcox, we got through. Marty Castillo, Marty's had some tough times in life. Marty, he obviously was in the World Series and he did his thing, but he's had his trouble. But Marty's a good dude. Barbaro Garbe is now the Spanish announcer for the Tigers, and this is really basically the same thing. I mean, they're all the guys. So David Bergman, another guy we passed and all that stuff. So as a team, as a whole, all those guys were super. The coaches, like I said, they were really good to me as well. And so a lot of them, like I said, a lot of us guys, they've passed.
Well, let's talk about Dave Bergman. There's a story.
Down in the bullpen?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, when I got traded, it was the first place I got to was Seattle. So Sparky wanted me. Well, I played against Bergie in San Francisco, so it really was with the Reds. So the old Kingdom. And so he said, well, Dave, get in the batter's box. And Dave goes, I faced him, in San Francisco. We need to get in. Well, Bergie, if the plate was over near you, he would be this far away. Well, I got the kick, and I got the arm drop, the wrist drop, and it sailed right into his ribs. Now, he's so far from the plate, I felt so bad. Well, he pulled all the muscles in his back. He had to go on the DL for 2 weeks. So I said to Bergie, I'm so sorry, Bergie. It's just stupid. But again, Sparky wanted me just to throw on the side, and that's your story about Bergie, unfortunately.
Yeah, so here's this rock star of the Detroit Tigers. He's just standing in, and you take him out. I like that.
Yeah, but he wasn't a pitcher, though.
The other thing that, there are many stories, Bill, but one which is near and dear to Mike Bellani being a sports journalist, but says Bill Scherrer stayed true to his New York roots, both during and after his professional playing days. While waiting out the riots that were celebrating outside Tiger Stadium after the Detroit World Series, Scherrer approached journalist Eric Brady, a friend. So talk that story.
Well, it got crazy. We won the World Series. They were trying to turn over the buses, and the Padres bus trying to get to the airport, and we're all there. I didn't know Eric at the time. I didn't even know he was from here. Went to Canisius. But he asked us, how does it feel to win the World Series? Especially where I went, from in the big leagues to the minors and everything else. I said, first, I did ask him, I said, I heard the Bills won. So Eric looked at me and he goes, Billy, you just won the World Series, the biggest game. I said, and I did make the quote. I said, listen, so you understand, I've been a Tiger for only about 2 months, but I've been a Buffalo Bill fan my whole life. My dad worked at the stadium at War Memorial as a wire chief in Western Union, so I go back to the old days. And I'm the baby in my family, so we're not talking about just Cookie Gilchrist or LaMonica and Kemp and that stuff. So I'd be like Tiger Stadium, get a free seat behind a pillar at the old rock pile. And so when somebody made another article, they talked about Buffalo Mafia. I said, be careful who you're talking to in Buffalo Mafia. I've been won a World Series, and in 1984, I was talking about the Bills, and Eric later on told me, we didn't want to break your heart. The Bills lost late in the fourth quarter to the Seattle Seahawks that night, so I thought the Bills won. So, again, that is true. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm glad. I wish I was at the Bills game versus being at the World Series, but Yeah, I've been a Bills fan a long time, even no matter where I lived. I said, we're born and raised in Buffalo. I said, you come here to visit. It's like my kids. I can land-base my kids, but you can't. And if you do, we'll walk you to Niagara Falls, but we'll push you over. Because, you know, I used to tell people, no matter where I've lived, and I've lived everywhere, I said, this is home. But I said, nobody moves to Buffalo out of their own. I said, if you're moving to Buffalo, you're running from the law. There's no way. You know, we know Scherrer and know they came here to try to hide. But people either come home and say, God, beef on wick, chicken wings, you know, Genesee. You know, you can go on and on. I know the weather, we get the shit weather. That's why I'm in Phoenix now. But to me, it's home. And, you know, people who come here, they realize it. But they do. They live and die with the Bills. One day the Sabres will do something, who knows? But my son's still a passionate Sabre fan, so, well, yeah, that's a good story about me.
So here's another story. In 1994, as was mentioned in the tape, the Toronto Sun awarded you the annual Scout of the Year award for duty above and beyond the call, as he pitched batting practice to a prospect in Cortland, New York. In Cortland, New York, in the rain while wearing white dress shoes. The batter lined a pitch back at Scherrer that knocked him to the muddy ground. Walking off the field to a standing ovation from the other scouts in attendance, Scherrer remarked, "It reminds me of the old days. I'd come in the game, and the guys in the other dugout would stand and cheer."
Well, that's a true story. You know? I know even when I pitched in the big leagues, the Red Sox guys were grabbing more than just one bat. So you're right. But it is true. That kid, he hit a bullet right back at my face. So it was. But I didn't wear very good clothes. I was always wearing this bootlegs. But I did have moccasins. You're right. He knocked me over that. That was fun. Cortland Apples. Well, that was in India. Now that it used to be. That used to be. Cortland was also an independent collegiate league too, right? Mm-hmm. In Cortland.
So talk to me about, in our little card discs, we did not have Sparky Anderson. What was he like?
He was the kiss of death. Meaning, we were just talking about it in there about Sparky when I first came in. I did pretty well against left-handed hitters, so I became that specialty. And Sparky was always putting out quotes. So he would always say that Scherrer gets left-handers like clockwork. Back in '85, I couldn't get my mother out, and Sparky was quoted, "The clock stopped." So, and then Gibby, he'd always say, Gibby used to try to label he'll be the next Mickey Mantle, even though Mantle was a switch hitter. So, and he also did that with a guy that I'm still friends with and still scouting now with the Oakland A's, is Chris Patero. He made Chris Patero the next Rookie of the Year. His first month of the season, that's when Lou was going to move from second to third, and Patero was going to play second, and he came out, he goes, this guy is a Rookie of the Year, blah, blah, blah. Maybe another month later, Chrissy was down in the minors and never showed up again, except, later on in Minnesota. So Sparky would always give you the kiss of death. You never wanted to hear it. But beyond that, Sparky would always use that line, "You're one of the best." I realized later from Jim Leland, he goes, "You know what that means? There's 5,000 people, but you're one of the best. You're probably 5,000. So he'd always use that line too. But Sparky was a good man. He was a great baseball mind. A lot of those guys. I thought I had a lot of really other good managers too. Guys that you probably wouldn't even know because they're not well known. But Sparky, like I said, got the most out of guys. He was great. If he had good coaches and good players, Sparky was really good with the media and all the rest. But I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to play for Sparky Anderson.
Did you have to pinch yourself when in 1984 you start with the Reds,
right,
and they didn't have a season worth talking about, and all of a sudden here you are in August of '84, you find yourself with Detroit. Did you kind of like an aha moment saying, holy cow?
Well, we were just talking about that before we came in here. I said, you got to remember, I broke camp in '84 because I was the Rolaids winner with the Reds in '83. So we had a new manager. It was Vern Rapp, a very disciplinary guy. He was in St. Louis. I got rid of him, and so we didn't start off very good, and I didn't pitch very well either. And so when it really came down to it, I was sent down in the minors at the All-Star break. So people don't realize I got traded to Detroit for my old roommate and still pitching coach for the Indians, Carl Willis, in cash. So I was traded through the minor leagues to go to Detroit. So it wasn't even a big league. I went from big league to big league. So we were just telling the story about it when, we were at these kind of question and answers thing, and Morris says, talk about the 35-5 team. And I looked at Jack, I said, are you an idiot? I said, I was with the Reds that were 5-35. You guys were 35-5. So for me, it's even more mind-boggling that I would have been in the minor leagues and then be traded to be actively involved, as crazy as it was. But I always said, when I first got over there, I said, I just hope I don't screw this up. And thank God I did.
You didn't talk about the only other Cairns card. It's this Bill Scherrer. So what's the report on Bill? If you had to report.
Really?
Talk to me about Bill Scherrer.
Well, then I scouted for 33 years. I amateured for 11, done pro and major league scouting and I remember Cale Ripken, senior, when I couldn't make that team out of spring training. And I realized when he said to me, Cale, he said, Billy, I said, maybe it's time for me to retire. That was Batista. They brought in some extra good arm guys, Peraza. And he smoked more than I did. And he said, close the door. And he goes, Billy, I live on 4 things. So I hope you try to leave this room with 4 of them. 1, play as long as you can, as hard as you can, because the day it's over, it's over. They take the uniform off. If you can't do that, you go to 2, you go to coaching. You're on the field, you're helping kids. If you can't do 2, and now he's taking another puff, and I'm smoking, and you go to 3, you go to scouting. Even though you're not in uniform, you're representing baseball and trying to either amateur sign kids or evaluate and get trades through either minor leagues or major leagues. Takes another big puff. And I looked at him, I said, what's number 4? And he said, to be a fan. And I say that because of all the stands I've been sitting in, especially through the major leagues, and I hear all the fans like me, watching the Bills, watching your team. If they win, we feel great. If they lose, we feel like we lost our best friend. And I realize we've all made those comments. Now that I've been a part of everything in baseball, whether, like I said, pro scouting, major league scouting, and I made those evaluations in my rooms. So in amateur, you compare him to some player today, his abilities. Pro level, you may do that too. But the major league level, you look at roles and what roles they play. And the more I sat behind home plate, and I realized we all think we're the number 1 starter. We all think we're going to be the cleanup hitter. And the more level you go through the bubble, like Jamestown or Buffalo, okay, now you got to go through all New York. Then you got to go through the Mid-Atlantic. Then you got to play against National. And all of us have a goddamn ego. We better to play sports. If not, you shouldn't be playing. It's about winning. Still is winning. Now that I'm old and gray, I don't care. I love my kids, and I clap when they can tie their shoelaces. But it is about winning. And when I look at myself on the mound, just like you showed on the video, the first thing I would say to a scout, where does this guy fit? Now, he looks like me, is Chris Sale. 6'6", 160, that low. The only thing is he threw 96 and 98. I threw 86 and 88. But you realize that was the role you played, deception and sink. And I could pitch every day. So the role that I was a left-hander specialist who could pitch back to back to back. And so that helped me sometimes compare. Even when guys were comparing me and their amateur stuff, I said, when Chris Sale was drafted by the White Sox, we got you. I said, well, who is this guy? Chris Sale. So I'm in spring training in Glendale, and I said, geez, I'm with Rick Hahn. I said, God, he is skinny. I know I am, but God damn, I weigh more than he does. Rick goes, you want to go weigh? I said, let's get him. Come on, kid, let's go weigh each other. You're 170, I'm 168, but we didn't do that. But that's what we did. We compared it. We compared bodies. So if you're asking me what I would be, now that I've done all the scouting for 33 years, I was a situational left-hander. But in our day, we pitched in the minors, we started. So that was our gig. So in today's era, if I was still young enough and I could get to where I'm at now, I'd like to give it a chance and start and see what it is, come up with a changeup or something. I'd like to do that. But hey, I was just blessed to be able to play in the big leagues, so I'm not going to knock it at all.
Pitcher, starter, as a pitcher, starter, reliever, what was your most comfortable?
Well, it'd be relieving. I mean, I relieved most of I had 3 starts in the major leagues, but I was a reliever. Like I said, We could pitch back to back to back. I pitched 10 straight games one time. So, I mean, and we didn't get involved in it. They asked how you doing. You said, you're fine. You know, so that you just pitched. So, I mean, starting was good, but you already knew every time you started, you pitched once every 5 days. You know, the bullpen, you could have a bad day, and the next day, hopefully, you get back in. And as I told my kids sometimes, that was yesterday's news. You know what you do with a newspaper? You put it in recycle. Yesterday was the 4th or the 5th? 4th?
Fifth.
Well, today's the 5th. Nobody gives a shit about the 4th anymore. So the same thing in baseball. You know, so you have a bad day, you get back on the horse, and you do it again. You know, and just hope to have the coaches have confidence in you enough to give you back the ball. You know, and the hard thing about being in the big leagues, even today with 30 clubs, you fail too much, you start panicking because you're thinking, I'm going to go back to the minors. And it's a tough thing. I played, like I said, I ran out of uniforms. I played with 12 different organizations and ended my career in Mexico owned by the Braves. So I have no regrets in my career. I just said, you know, I was just blessed that somebody gave me the opportunity once I stopped playing to get into scouting and to learn that trade. You know, learn the amateur. I did Latin America at Expansion 15, 6 weeks doing the whole country. People thought because I played there, I said, I'm lucky I can speak English. And you want me to go to Venezuela? No, forget. If they send you to Venezuela now, they don't want you coming back because the government's in. But that was an experience through Expansion 15 with the Marlins, the original Marlins with the Rockies. You know, we get ball bust because of the White Sox losing so many games last year, which I have no hard feelings toward anybody. They've all been good to me, and I'm blessed that I was in the game for 48 years. But I don't root against the White Sox. But I used to tell people, hey, listen, you guys can kick the White Sox all you want. There's a team over in Denver that's pretty shitty, too. I said, how about getting on that bandwagon with them? And some of those guys in the front office have been there for 34 years. Now, nobody wants anybody to be fired. But if you're a sap that's going to pay $20, $30 to watch a piece of shit product, I used to tell my kids, I go to a movie, and you leave a half hour later, we got had. 3 days later, I go back to the same movie. You're the fool, not me. You knew it was a shitty movie. So if you're going to keep paying the prices to go to these games, watching the White Sox or not, but it's a new regime. Chrissy Getz is there. We'll see through time. But again, somebody once called me and asked me would I file a suit because of age discrimination because they couldn't give me a reason why they fired me. Now, obviously, it was Kenny Williams and Rick and Jerry and all that. And I said, first of all, I'm glad you called, but I'm not suing baseball. Baseball has been so good to me. And I said, what you've given me and the security and the blanket, I said, there are a lot of people who make a lot more money than I did. But I'll tell you one thing, they didn't have as much fun as I had through 48 years of meeting the greatest people in the world, whether it was playing-wise and minor league players and minor league coaches as well as amateur scouting and pro. Now, I was as good a friend as Jim Fergosi Sr. We'd argue, somebody once said, who's wrong in that car? Because we'd argue back and forth. But again, now that the thing is, now it's 2025, all these people around are gone. They're past. And I became the old habit. So in analytics, and I finally knew how to spell analytics now, but there's nothing wrong with that. I'm still going to be old school, the ones who taught me, the rebel from Buffalo. But you got to understand something. I do believe you still have to wear a jockstrap. There's something to be said about talking to somebody, even when they're wrong. I have respect for it. And I think the kids of today, we could learn from them just as much as I can learn from them too. I think so they'll miss me. So if somebody called me when I come back, I'm not going to tell you the club. I said, you're shitting me. You guys want me? You know I'm not going to mince words. They said, no, would you think of coming back? Now, if I told my wife, I said, hell, I'd be on another plane going running around watching. Amateur with rental cars, and I can't smoke at the high schools anymore. So for me, I'd have to go back to dipping and chewing, and then although if Jim Leland was here, he'd have an ashtray right here, right now. I'd like to see you. Jim, you can't smoke in here. I said, go to shit, take a shit. He'd be smoking.
Well, speaking of Jim Leland, I've got to set this story up. Because, again, I'm in the car, on the phone with Bellani. Bellani's in the car, on the phone. We're talking back and forth. Next thing you know, out pops Bill Scherrer on the phone. Bill jumps on the conference call. We're driving, Bill's there. I don't know. I don't know. So he conferenced you in.
I was on conference with him.
He conferenced him.
I knew it came from him.
Yeah. So there all of a sudden, you're on the phone, and Mike allows is how, and this has got to stay secret because we're working on the possibility of having Jim here on his 60th anniversary later this year. We'll see. No promises. We don't know. But that triggered a story because Bill is Bill. You know, as you've seen already, a professional storyteller. He had his own Jim Leland story.
Oh, God.
And
Well, I have two,
you
I
gotta
have two
share.
of them. I have two of them.
Well, I heard one. Go
Well,
ahead.
the one was, and I didn't know Leland. Got to remember, Leland was in Detroit in the minor leagues. Sparky came in, and obviously Sparky took a lot of his people from Cincinnati. And I'm not saying we all been sent down or we're mad, and Jimmy was the AAA manager of Evansville. And it was the complex in spring training. So you're only playing complex games. So I was just either couldn't get the ball over the plate, and I didn't know Jim Leland from Madam. I was playing for Indianapolis in spring training. And I walked the first two or next three. All I can remember him, because I said, you know, the manager comes up, he goes, listen, our boys have had enough, we're done. Thank you. And I'm on the mound like this. I mean, what are you doing? He goes, he's had enough. He can't watch me throw anymore. So he laughed. I said to him, I said, that happened? He goes, well, I know. I remember it. You were throwing the ball all over the place, and I had no patience, and whether you could smoke or not. And the other one was he was drunk, which we all can drink, and he was in Pittsburgh because he's up in the suite, and somebody started talking about makeup. And that's a big thing when you start knocking people about makeup. You better know something, you know. So some of the guys were telling me about this player in Pittsburgh. I'm not going to tell you the name. It don't make any difference. And I said, well, what kind of makeup is it? I said, first of all, I have 6 kids. Sometimes I don't know what's going on in their lives. How do I going to plant-based makeup? How thorough are you with this? So Lee, there was a rain delay, so he comes into the lunchroom in Pittsburgh. He starts yelling at me, which I don't care. He's not going to hurt my feelings. But he thinks I said, makeup? Who the hell's talking makeup? He goes, there's only 2 things I can't coach, a drunk or a druggie. He goes, go ask me about the Oakland A's. They hated each other. Look how many World Series rings they won. And so, again, and then he said, the only ones that ever talk is a backup catcher, which I did, and the poor guy that made the comment, he couldn't, here's Leland. So he yells at me, let's go have a cigarette. So we're smoking again. And I told him the story, and he said, but he goes, when people put down makeup, passive, somebody says he's passive, or she's passive. Sounds like they're weak. Well, we drafted, and it was probably one of the few ones I did do good. We made a trade for Joe Borchard, who was the top prospect with the White Sox. We got a guy named Matt Thornton, another first-round guy, and the big argument with him, he was passive. Well, he pitched awfully good for the White Sox, and he also pitched for the Yankees, if you remember him pitching for the Yankees, 2 big left-handers. So you got to be careful when I hear about makeup, and I agree with Leland. But, I mean, again, Jimmy didn't mince words, and I hope one day you guys get a chance to see him or come down because he's a hoot. And I'll tell you one thing. I said, and I mean this. I see him at the winter meetings all the time, and we'll be outside smoking or something. And I enjoy 1 cigarette. Now, I can finish a pack a day. No, I'm not saying that. But Jimmy can smoke 3 or 4 cigarettes. And I said, gee, man, because I said, I can't even breathe. I said, to sit here, and he'll say, they don't listen to me. Those analytical people, they just have me in there for show. But if you ever not have heard or listened to a guy like Jimmy Leland, I hope he does come because he's a hoot. He's fun to listen to. Straight shooter.
I'm looking at Frank Jagoda III, right there. Frank is our manager, but more importantly, he too was a scout for the Tampa Bay Rays most recently.
Full time.
Yeah.
So you worked, was RJ still there, RJ Harrison?
Oh, yeah, RJ's
He's still kicking, somebody told me he's still going.
still handling it.
Yeah, he's still going.
I did more pro.
Oh, okay.
Did some pro.
Well, you're not, that's why I said Kenny Kravick, go Kenny.
Oh, yeah, all those guys.
Kenny Califano, they're still kicking too, right?
They're around.
Wow.
Really good guys. Ken's a great dude. So.
You guys have done, I know you're not there now, right?
Yeah. No.
Okay, but you guys have done a wonderful job to try to mesh both. I know some people say they don't pay, they don't do this. I know you lost some guys to other organizations. But you've had older people that you still establish and not overwhelm them, obviously with Kenny and Kravick and Califano, and RJ still being there. But you also use analytics.
Well,
and you've done a good job, and I think you've done both. And I think that we merged together with that, People think that I'm the Antichrist and that I'm going to go out. No, but I mean, when they see me come into the stadium, I would do anything for anybody. But you cross me, I'm not your friend. And so it's funny because everyone goes, oh God, here comes Scherrer. And I mean, I'm not like that.
You said something earlier that kind of, I broke in with the Twins, and I broke in player development.
Okay.
So I was a beneficiary of a big wave, as I'm sure you saw it.
Right.
College coach was getting hired.
Right.
And I didn't play one inning of professional baseball.
No,
Right?
that's all right.
But I was a beneficiary of that. And I think the reason I was able to hang around for just 10 years, which pales in comparison to 48 years or some of the time you guys put it in, was I had a little bit of feel. And
It's important.
That's, you know,
Like school.
No one to speak
Right.
in the clubhouse, no one to listen.
Right.
You know, Sandy Parlazzo and I were good friends. We worked together with the Twins and Mike Body and those guys. So,
Right.
you know, I know you know Sandy. So it comes into when to speak, when not to speak. Sometimes it's speak when spoken.
Right.
As a young coach, kind of cutting their teeth. And then it transitioned into some more front office and the pro scouting side, which
Right.
I really enjoyed the pro scouting side because of all the things you're talking about. The analytics are telling me one thing, but my eyes and my gut are telling me something completely different, or it's telling me the same. And it's telling me that, all right, so this makes sense, and this is why we value him at this place or not. So, but just kind of listening to your story, it doesn't matter if it's
It really doesn't. It doesn't.
Baseball is baseball.
Right.
The evaluation is the evaluation.
It is.
You're right about that, that some teams went really hot and heavy with analytics, just, it was like ripping a Band-Aid off. It was like it was full scale, 0 to 100, and that, you know, the Astros did that. They won a World Series and then fired 40 people.
Right.
And, you know, how do you do that? They just won you a World Series ring. You know, Bobby Heck was part of that group.
Oh, I know Bobby. Bobby's been around.
I don't know if you run into Kevin at all, but.
Kevin Elfring? Not Kevin Elfring. You're not.
Kevin Ibach.
Oh, Ibach.
Yeah.
I know Kevin Elfring used to work for the Rays 2 years ago.
But, you know, and then you mentioned going to the Dominican or, you know, Venezuela International.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really cool opportunity to also be in the front office with USA Baseball. And I tell kids all the time, back home, I'll give lessons and
Right.
I'm going to manage the Tarp Skunks. And they'll ask about some of the things, and I'll say, well, look, like, you go to a third world country, there's about 500 players who are equally as good as you. They're 3 or 4 years, 5 years younger than you, and they
Right.
want it way more than you do. Because that's their life.
Well, again, since when I came home last year, you know, and obviously they was taken off the road early, so I mean, I'm sitting in Clarence Center, just sitting here. It's all right because it's almost like the wintertime that I'm doing the same thing. And, you know, I'd go to the Bison game occasionally. They asked me what I would do with some things. And it's the same thing. I look at things now, like we were talking about just scouting. And I also go the other way with that too. I've seen people, just because you didn't play, you can be better. You can be good. You learn, like you just said, learn from, what do college people do? They recruit, don't they? They have to go in the house, don't they?
And they recruit 15, 16-year-old kids.
Right. The problem sometimes with the old school, and I'm sort of in between the both, is that the olden days, like Fergosi would say, when people were done playing, and most of it was minor leagues, there's two options they had: player development or scouting. And most people who knew, if I came up with the Reds, they knew me for 9 years. So they could actually, would you do this? Would you have any interest in doing it? Well, everybody was talking about the analytics. And Fergosi, who doesn't mince words, was in the lunchroom in Clearwater with the Philly stuff. He says, so you guys understand something. You college guys came in here too when that used to be offered to ex-players and everything else, because there's not many of them anyway. Well, now Fergosi's saying it, and I already knew, so I was going out and smoke outside and get out of the lunchroom. And I remember John Castleberry, who coached at George Washington and did a lot of the Cape stuff. And you know what? And he brought up a good point. He said, if we knew what the money was now, that it wasn't then, we'd be still doing that. And the only argument sometimes you get is a guy with his experience and pro knowledge, whether minor leagues or not, cannot go to a college to be a coach, not knocking a degree, but that's what you're coaching me for. You want me to be the pitching coach, correct? You want me to be whatever, and you can't do that, but the degree proves it. But I will say this, I have seen some kids, nothing against my ex-players and everything else either, but I have seen people that never wore a jockstrap either that are phenomenal. And I'll protect a woman, even though I have 4 girls and 2 boys and I got more toilet paper in my house. I will say this, there are women that I know right now that know more shit than a guy who ever played. Because sometimes big league guys take for granted because they went to the big leagues that they have, or they don't know how hard it was work. Mike asked me a good question. He goes, what was your daily routine when you were going to do your scouting? I said, really? No, we're talking about the major leagues now. I had all major leagues. So I have to write reports on every team. So if we have 30 on one team and 30 on the other, and I'm obviously going to have a 4-game series, I can only stay with that one team and then follow the other team out. So I'll write some of that. So you have to get a hotel room, connect the dots with the hotels, then get the airlines. I have to buy my airlines. If it's a rental car, I need the rental car. Then I have the ticket operations that you have to get it on, now we have online versus the old ticket windows. And then be on the road for X amount of times. Now, I was out for 6 straight weeks doing the whole thing in Venezuela, in Expansion 15 back in 1963. Or even when I was with Gossage, that one time we were sitting there doing things, and I said, listen, I'm not going on 3 laundries now. I'm going home doing laundry. But I've been doing it since I was 18, even when I went to UNLV when I didn't sign with the Indians. And somebody asked me, how did I go to UNLV? I said, it was the only college I could spell, except I didn't capitalize the letter. Where I went in my life, nobody can take away from that. When guys call me today and say, are you all right? I said, all right what? Guys, I'm not dead. If you call me, I'll just go in the garage and have more coffee or have a Budweiser and have another cigarette. I said, don't worry. So the guys of that age, I hope that they get to the finish line, like in real society, be 65 or 64. And the ones that do appreciate the old veterans. As I once told somebody one time, don't ever roll your eyes with me, you're not going that good. Because I don't have all the answers. You can teach me just as much as I hopefully can teach you something. But that's what makes the world go round.
I'll tell you one thing, the one thing, is, for me, kind of this transition was a family decision.
Right.
And the people I stay in touch with the most are like the Skeeter Barnes of the world.
I just got off the phone with him.
Yeah,
Skeeter and Gary Reedus, we all came.
we all work together.
Skeeter. He retired, remember? He rightly retired.
Yep, so like Sammy Perlazzo and those types of guys.
Right.
The guys that, you don't hear from or you don't
Right.
stay in touch with.
Right.
The guys that are your age that,
But it's not, listen, it's nobody's fault.
There's so much.
Right.
There's so much knowledge that is spewed and so many
Yep.
nuggets you can pull from. And, you talk about the airlines and the
Yep.
rental cars. The best is when you're waking up, you got 6 different radars going on. You're 4 hours from here and 3 from here. I can get in the
Right.
hotel here. Next thing you know, you got 3 hotels booked. And you're like, man, I hope nowadays it's on Concur. I'm like, man, I hope they approve this. I don't want to pay for 2 of these things myself. So it's just one of those things. But
Yep.
no, I appreciate your time.
No, no, you're right.
Relate somewhat, not wholly. But
I wish, if the only thing I would wish, and again, I'm not coming out of retirement at this moment, what I wish, because we don't have a lot of people multiply that go to games, what makes us all wiser and younger is having older people, even when I started. You got to remember, I started at 33. Even though I played when I was 19, it doesn't matter. You're still a young pup learning a new profession. I learned from older people, from amateur to pro to major league and all that stuff. And they're no longer here. And what we all, whether you played or not, is to gravitate to each other. So after the game at Pittsburgh, when we have Soho's in that local bar there, now they got, Bar Louie, whether you drink or not, I'm too old now, 3 or 4 beers and I'm ready to, not cigarettes, but 2 or 3 beers. But we all could sit here and have wings and talk about the game. What makes us all smart? What makes us fans? Is to talk about the game. And we relate to the Bills or the Sabres or whatever else we've got is, oh my God, they should have done this. Or why? It's common who they drafted. Same thing with your favorite team, whether it's I've lost. Somebody asked me, do I watch it? I do not. And some old-timer scout could not believe when he asked me, he said, well, what are you watching? I said, you won't believe this. I am watching this because I wouldn't lie. I'm watching the WNBA draft. They said, come on, you, of all people, watching a women's draft? I said, yeah, I want to see where that Connecticut girl, I know she's going 1, but it was just, I'd rather watch that, unfortunately, than watch a baseball game. And it's no cut down on the game. But don't play Major League Baseball. College, here we go now. I was coached by somebody in the city of Buffalo that we worked for a living, probably worked at General Motors or something. tool and die guy. 2 bats and balls as local kids to play at a park. We had one radio station. Now, I'm not that old. I'm the baby in my family. One television game, the NBC game of the week. Some of it was black and white. And we listened to the games. We understood how and I'm not knocking travel baseball, but that's what's happened. You've lost baseball people because of lacrosse and soccer and everything else, and the middle child doesn't want to play romper room, but he's not picked to play in the goddamn travel. And girls, cool, too. You know, girls can play 3 sports, but they got to make a decision. And what happened is you lost the community. You lost playing at Delaware Park or Casanova Park, the places I played. You missed that. And so what happens is we don't watch it. We don't fundamentally. We've got all these schools now. You can tell me about getting your hat down, close in. I mean, I think it's wonderful. But you're paying the guy $100. I said, I don't want your money. Teach the kids because it's from the heart. They did. I know we're looking for livings. Lancelotti opened the baseball school 34 years ago when I went into scouting.
He gave me a
Rico.
hitting lesson about 27 years
I hope it was bad because I used to always yell at him. No, he's a good instructor. But it's the same thing when I come home, now that I'm home, and we used to do that, in the wintertime and then go off to spring breaks with the colleges, down in Florida. He told me there's 6 or 7 schools now. And that's not saying but you're confusing kids. You're teaching one way and you're teaching the other. And I'm not saying whether your background, but it's become a monopoly. And the only thing that comes back to me is money. Okay, when I was in the city of Buffalo and I asked Cy Williams' son, he goes, Billy, you wouldn't recognize the city ballpark anymore. They're awful. But don't get me wrong, Clarence and Williamsville and Amherst, but they got still great unity. They still have it together. I know they got a little bit more well to do, I get it, but they play. Jonah Heim, Amherst, Armstrong, and obviously we got hurt, but Clarence High School. I mean, I still follow some of it even though I'm living in Phoenix, but we don't play it anymore and we've lost that. We've actually got better parks sometimes. I mean, I used to play at Brighton and somebody was asking me to come over. Well, they already knocked a few baseball fields down. Well, because nobody's playing. So what we've missed, though, and I go back to the middle class, our society is lived by middle class people. Rich are going to be rich no matter what we do. Poor is going to be poor, and you hope to God they can. But we got more core people that are working their ass off, and they can't afford to keep sending their kids to goddamn schools and everything else. I'm not taking anything from the rich, but they still love to play as a community. We've lost that. Let them see me come back.
As we start wrapping up, I don't know if there's an ability to wrap up, because you're really good. You're really good. But the question you asked me is, I'm looking at your Roar of 84 40th anniversary, and you have numbers along your
These
side.
are all deceased numbers that we got on the 40th anniversary.
Okay.
So the question is, you name the number.
All right, here's your hardcore guys. Number 29.
Number 29,
84
who's
Tigers.
no longer with us.
Anybody?
Detroit Tigers.
Anyway? Okay.
I'll give it to Aurelio Lopez.
All right, 38.
He's best. Who the hell is? Oh, I know. God, he would kill me. Well, you won't get that. Roger Craig, the pitching coach.
Oh, yeah.
I got to make sure I get this. 51 was Alex Grammis, the third base coach. 50. Who the hell was 50? Look it up. I can't even get it. 26 was Gates Brown. 21, Willie Hernandez. 14 was Dave Bergman, and obviously the commander-in-chief, number 11, Sparky Anderson. Don't say.
I won't. Gates Brown, anybody remember his story? Did he? Do you remember the Gates Brown hot dog story?
No. I don't think so. I don't think I heard it.
All right, here it is. Just on YouTube. My own personal story. Take a drink. And Gates Brown was working for the Tigers. He was a greeter for many, many years. My daughter was the assistant general counsel for the Detroit Tigers. And I'm there because I'm taking advantage of a free ticket.
Right.
And I'm in our office. It's a rain delay. And there's Gates Brown. And I'm a camcorder guy. And I said, oh, I went to I said, can I interview you? We're killing time.
Right.
And he goes, sure, I'm a good sport. So I'm there, he's there, I've got my camcorder, there it is. And I bring him a hot dog, because I know the story. And I hand it to him while the camera's going on. You must, Gates Brown, tell me the hot dog story. And he goes, okay, here it is. 1984, that other year in Detroit.
Right.
Gates Brown, pinch hitter extraordinaire. Extraordinaire. Normally brought in the 8th and 9th inning. Seldom, if ever, played. During the early part of the game, he would do what he wasn't supposed to do. The manager was Mayo Smith, for those old-timers, Tiger guys. And he didn't like people eating in the dugout. So Gates one day was at the end of the dugout, and he had the clubhouse guy bring him 2 hot dogs with mustard and ketchup. So he's there, it's like the 3rd inning, and he's eating away. All of a sudden, Mayo yells out, Gates! Gates, you're up! And so he wasn't ready for this, so he didn't want to give up his hot dog and put it in his jersey.
Oh, my.
Put the hot dog in his jersey. Figured this is the 3rd, 4th inning. Who cares? The pressure's off. He doesn't have to really get a hit. But as would have it,
You got
he
hit.
swings, it goes into the gap. He's rounding first. So he's a lumbering guy.
Big guy.
He's a big guy. He slides into second. He's safe. He gets up. He's dusting himself off. And there, all the way down, is mustard and ketchup.
He was a treat.
The umpire starts looking, he goes, are you okay? He goes, oh, no. So, of course, he's so slow, they have to bring in a pinch runner.
Right.
So he's walking across, the pitcher goes, are you okay? No, don't ask. So he gets over there. Mayo now sees it. And he's absolutely livid that he had actually ate the hot dog, and immediately said, this is Gates telling the story. I'm tears rolling down my eyes. He goes, if you made enough, I would fine you more than the $50 I'm fining you, but I'm fining you $50. And that's the Gates Brown story, which is on YouTube. And whenever they got together on their reunion,
Yeah.
they didn't ask Gates Brown about anything else but.
Well, he's passed now. He's
Yeah, he
gone.
passed
He
away.
passed with us in
So
fantasy.
that's the Gates Brown.
Gates Brown.
Gates
Yeah.
Brown.
That's
Now
it.
talk about because you are
Yeah, what
rock
am I?
and tour extraordinaire, but there's got to be an event or two that you saw that was either was on your team or the other team that you said, Greg, if we were at the bar and you say this is the funniest thing I ever saw, or the most hilarious thing, whether with your teammate or not.
I'm trying to think of that. Was a funniest story I could ever remember. Well, I'm not going to. Yeah, really, I don't. I was telling Mike coming down here. I said, in the amateur sun the last time I was cross-checking with the Reds, I said there was a lot of chaos with the Reds, because Jim Bowden was the new GM, and there was a lot of. I'm going to get into the hanky-panky, but there was a kid that popped out of Canada. And Canada at that time doesn't play high school baseball, so they play a lot more summer. And they also had visa factors. That rule has now changed, so they're the same as the States. But this kid popped up, and somebody said, well, Billy, he's about 40, 50 miles from your house. I said, well, I'm cross-checking. You're living in Grand Island. I said, I don't get a chance. So we had 5 guys, our scouting director at the time, and we went to a place called Connorville, which I pitched in the Intercounty League as well. And the league, the intercounty is good in the summer. They don't even play high school, so it's almost like a pickup thing at the park. And this guy's playing first, and I don't even try to use the competition, whether we play here in our high schools or not. Probably, I would say it's worse. But we had 5 Reds, and there was a guy from the Blue Jays that was there, and he was hiding on the tree, and this guy was hit a little bit, nothing overwhelming. So we brought him to a pre-draft workout. Now, if you asked me what round he would go, late round, I like gambles, but this guy, you got a limited position, can't run, playing against this competition. So he comes to the pre-draft. The pre-draft's just before the draft. So usually priority guys. He gets up and hitting balls into the seats. And we had these expert guys like, the Apostle 12 and 14. Real guys, been around a while. And Bob Zook was Hungarian. So I'm not the scouting director. And he would say, Billy, I didn't see the Vito kid. And I'm laughing. I said, the kid's, Bob, it's Votto. I said, but I didn't see the Vito. Now, I didn't want to laugh at him. I said, I'm not the scouting director. Go ask Casey McKeon, Jack McKeon's son. So he gets up again in the second round, bullets into the seats. And it's really, it wasn't just hitting up machines throwing 85, 90. This kid was, but again, same thing. He has limited position. And so he comes back again and says this. So we get to the draft. Now, we didn't write reports. We did, but there was a lot of hanky-panky going on with the Reds organization. I'm not going to really get into that. So Casey would say, don't write the report, because if it goes and transmits, somebody else could grab it, whether you work for the Brewers or the Pirates. It seemed like somebody else got what we were saying. A lot of shit, which is terrible, but Casey didn't care. We end up drafting that kid in between the first round and the second. It's a supplement thing. Now, you got to understand, I don't mind spending money on some gamble, whether you can run or throw or you think. But this guy literally, for the competition he was, and I mean, he couldn't run, and he couldn't field, and he didn't really get any gauge at all. We take a ballsy move, and that guy became Joey Votto. And that's a fact story, and you almost laugh about it, because Tim Naring, who's now the assistant GM of the Yankees, who I've known very much, long time, and Timmy Boy was the farm director, field coordinator. And so they tried to make him a catcher. And I'm not knocking about Joey Votto as a catcher, but they saw him go through the system. So now all of a sudden years go by and you live on one tool and we all get credit for it. Everybody got fired. And to be fair to Bowden, you're supposed to write the report. The only one they didn't fire was me, and they should have. But I was in Ottawa doing pro coverage, and that's when they called. They said, would you mind if we trade you? I said, trade me? I said, and I don't mince words as we know. And I said, I've never heard of trading a scout. I mean, the Reds are paying me. I got the health care, everything else, and I'm doing the Ottawa Lynx in AAA. They said, I go, well, who's he? He goes, you know who it is. And I used to say, I know a lot of people from high and low, unless you're calling for a real reason. I said, he goes, whatever. Well, what happened was I was traded to the Pirates for an area scout, but they couldn't make a transaction of that. So Littlefield, which is Dave Littlefield, the brief, time he was the GM of the Pirates, that was where Vukovic and those guys were. They're great pro staff. None of them left. But somebody realized I signed a contract with the Pittsburgh Pirates for $1 because it was a transaction. But I was getting paid by the Reds, and the health care was of the Reds, and even Littlefield would say, but you can talk to other clubs. You talk about screwed up. And you're working for the Pirates. I'm getting paid by the Reds. You guys hiring anybody? I need a job. Which I eventually turned down the Phillies job and went with the White Sox for the last 22 years. So, but those are good stories. I mean, the other stories I don't really. There was one, and it wasn't my fault. You talk about embarrassing moments. My first year in the big leagues, my first time I ever pitched was in a place called Coco Expo, which was the Houston Astros at the time. And Bill Fisher was my pitching coach, and my first manager was John McNamara. So, I mean, I'm sitting there, and, I'm finally going to pitch, and who's pitching for the Astros? Sutton, Richards, Ryan, which, I'm not really awed, but I mean, it's my first game, and I'm coming in. So when you're done pitching, you're supposed to sit down next to your pitching coach. Well, I'm there with Fish, and all of a sudden, Dwayne Walker, if you can remember Dwayne Walker, left-handed hitter, he gets up to bat. Well, I'm looking up. A lot of times you go up there and look at the batting order. And I look and I go, oh my God, I'm supposed to be hitting. So all of a sudden I looked at McNamara. I said, Mac, I'm supposed to be hitting. He goes, get the fuck up. I got the helmet on wrong like this. I'm running up with it with the wrong side up. And Dwayne hits the first pitch, ground ball. So poor McNamara goes, son of a bitch. He goes, time out. He's hitting out of order. He's a rookie. And I felt so bad, but I mean, I didn't even have the helmet on right. It was upside down. So I said, and I said the first time, but usually we were going to hit, but they allowed me to hit, but Dwayne hit the first pitch, and he had to go out there and tell him. So it was sort of embarrassing, I guess. Good impressions from McNamara and myself, I guess. And there was one other one too. The Reds fined you. I went to 6 instructional leagues because I didn't get it right. That means you're supposed to have your best prospects to go here. So I did 6 of them. Well, we were at the where the Yankees are. If you've ever been to Tampa, the Yankees got their complex. That was Reds. And we had our old stadium called Al Lopez because they thought that Tampa Bay was going to get the franchise, so they bulldozed that. So we used to dress in the minor league camp and then go over and play the games. Well, you get fined. A lot of guys who've maybe gone to AA, AAA a little bit, it gets old. They just don't want to go. And when they ask you, you go. At least my era was. So my roommate was Bruce Bereni. And Bruce, had a pretty decent career. I mean, he pitched in the big leagues for 6-7 years. And so he was late. He was driving. Well, you get fined. And so we, now all of a sudden, I'm still, at that stage where I can't screw up. I mean, not as much as Bruce. Bruce was knocking on heaven's door at the big leagues. So we had to dress. He goes, you better get going. We got to go. We're going to be late, because we had to dress and then drive the car over to the stadium. Well, I grabbed spikes, and I said, I came out, and they're both white shoes. So I can't go back. So Bruce goes, well, just put them on. Well, we had this guy who was the field coordinator, Rodney Plaza, very gentle. He'd look at you like this. So I walked out like this, and Plaza goes, oh my God. Because, it was almost a ritual with me anyway. He goes, okay, do me a favor. Go back and get your other left shoe. He goes, I can't find you. You put them on. But again, that was part of, in our day, we didn't have the money that these guys had. $25 is a great deal of money. We get, you're late. And so, but again, Bereni ended up going home. Oh, that's what it was. I would have had to pay for the fine. So they were going like 1 to 7 times whatever the number. Because Bereni left and he didn't have to get fined. But we both were fined because we were late. So they had to come up. The worst thing would be 7 times, whatever it was, 4 or 5, or 1 times 5, so it'd be $5. I forget what I pulled out, but they figured I still was fined. But I didn't get the max out of it though. But that was terrible. That was terrible. Yeah.
You weren't terrible. You're a terrific speaker, and you can tell nobody's left here.
They should have. I mean, I'll be held. I haven't even had a cigarette.
I know it. I can just see you starting to shake a little bit. But before you do so, I really want to have everybody kind of gather together for a photo op, this Tiger group with Bill. And Bill, I'm going to have you sit right next to the ultimate Tiger, Denny Lundberg, right there.
Well, wait a minute. Before we ask the question, who's your favorite Tiger?
Who's your favorite Tiger?
Favorite Tiger. You get one. Well, you can have 2. But Tiger, yeah, what a great man.
Denny.
Another one that passed on us too. What a great guy.
Who's your favorite Tiger, Denny?
Cale I liked a lot. I go way back. I go by like guys like Headminder or the lefty. But anyway, Caroline is I love that just guy retired. Is one of my big guys there.
Cabrera?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Old Florida Marlin. Yeah. Well, I mean, a long time ago. You're right. He was great.
David, what is it? Your
favorite Tiger?
Kaline.
Wally?
Goes back a long way with George Kell.
George Kell.
Another great human being. Another announcer. Yeah.
Did you announce that there were any other ones? Mickey Lawless.
What a
Tom
great,
Tom?
we just saw, when I was there in the last year, we went and saw him at the home, and he's still mentally, physically, he's there, but he's a hoot, man. He's a hoot.
Mark Fidrich, the bird.
I wish you know what, he came in the locker room one time because his cubbyhole was there and Lance was there because obviously they knew him through the time coming up. So I got to just meet him, unfortunately with all the story of what happened. I mean, that's too bad and sad. But boy, I'll tell you one thing, you're right about him. Boy, he put Detroit on the map, didn't he? And I was in high school in '76, so. Oh man. He was the national audience for everybody nationally, for sure.
Derek.
It was Biggie. I grew up on
Biggie, yeah.
David, do you have a memory of a Tiger?
Oh, Dick McCall? Yeah. See, that's what I mean. When they laugh at me, as much as we all know different sports, I used to do, or like, Kyle Yastrzemski, but then Joe LaHoud used to be up there. We used to imitate. I played basketball, football. I don't know how I lasted in football, but I played that. And we know all the sports. My brother played at UB with, when Calvin Murphy was at Niagara and Bonnie had Lanier and Randy Smith was at State. So I was 10 years older. So I'd go watch it, and the Buffalo Braves were still there. So we all were enamored and listened and watched and emulated. If these kids look at me right now, they said, God, that guy, as old as he is, I know he's on drugs. I know he's on drugs.
Russ, I know the answer to the question, but I'll ask you, who's your favorite Tiger?
1934 team.
All right. But there's a guy that jumped in the car one time with you. Who was that? Was it Dizzy Trout?
Dizzy Trout, yeah, I made everybody dizzy.
Dizzy Trout. Now, was he related to Steve Rainbow Trout, right? Was it?
Dizzy Trout, they played Jamestown down there at the stadium, the Major League team.
Wow.
And my father and I got in our car and we were starting up Faulkner Street back home. And a guy ran over and banged on the car Dizzy Trout, and I gotta get uptown to the guy, but I can't see him. We went another couple of blocks, maybe half a block, and he jumped out of the car and says, there he is, so he went over and sat with him.
Dizzy Trout, that's going back. God, even I don't know that. There is, you know what? That is a very good question. And everybody's talking about the new rules and all the things that are happening. And we still know that 60 feet, 6 inches, and the bags can get bigger, but it's still 90. Listen, we can get into discussion with it, but I actually protected the umpires. Maybe because we move kids too quick to the big leagues now, too, because they haven't learned or fundamentally understand how to win, how to be successful in one place, moving guys all over different positions when they should be playing one. That's why you drafted them. At least get them that, because that's what you're later on, maybe. But I've always said about the umpires, there was always conservative and liberal, as long as they're consistent. You know, there's days that we sit there, we watch the Bills game, and it's a first down. It happens. It happens. Human error. So for us too, players. And I always said, what we're missing is the real umpires again too. Why? They go upstairs. They're monitored all the time. They're abused. And somebody laughed and said, you never protected the umpires. I said, well, wait a minute here. I never have any rift. Close call here or close there. Sometimes there are guys that throw a 3-2 breaking ball with bases loaded, and that's the corner, and he got it there. That umpire rings him up. You should be swinging. When we were growing up as kids or little kids, what we were saying, swing the bat. Not everybody can throw strikes like you, so when you hit whatever you could hit. I don't say you want to be crazy and wild, but we've taken the element of the umpires who used to do this. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, tweak it. There's nothing wrong. Major plays. When Galarraga, who had the no-hitter, that's too bad. Perfect game, right? It was a perfect game. I understand it. But you know what? Galarraga stands way and beyond the scope of that. Why? Because he had class. Yeah, he could have been on the record books. No-hitter, perfect game. But he was sympathized to the umpire. We all make mistakes. We all do. But to me, we've lost the element for whatever you just said about umpires. Either sometimes they're going too quick, or they're so caught up with the TVs and I said, let everybody have their own makeup, their own kind of them versus clones. And I do think that I believe in some of the things that analytic does. I do believe there's some that we should have. I do believe that in our day, we'd sit there and the ball comes up or somebody goes, hey, they're going to sleep out here. Let's go, pick it up. So you got the ball, you went. You got guys over here, Steve Rogers grabbing his stuff over. It's time to move it on. So these games that are 4 hours, you're going to bed. Yeah, let's play. We used to play 2 hours in 35-minute games. Yeah.
Randy Jones threw 70.
Oh, he was ridiculous. He could throw strikes in just a machine. Yeah, but again, there's things like that I'm somewhat, I guess I will say I'm better. That moves it on. And then they come up and they tell me, well, they can't do it because they're throwing 100 miles. I said, I think it's wonderful. I said, I threw 98, but I had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning because I could never throw 98. I could go fast 98. But I'm saying is, that doesn't mean they could pitch. They don't know how to do the things I just said to you. So who are we blaming? I don't blame Major League Baseball. I blame where it started. When I try to finish, I went off on a different tangent. Low, crawl, walk, run. Your father coached you. Your father played catch with you. Your father might have told you about a 4-seam and a 2-seam. Your coaches said, get up there and swing the bat. Throw strike. Maybe they weren't told technically. They knew how to do fundamentals like everybody has now, all the experts. And then you went to college, and then you went and played here, and you learned by repetitions about playing with guys or players you played with. I was blessed because I played with 12 Hall of Famers. I'll always bitch and moan to those guys. I said, how many years did you play? He said, 15. I'd look at him and I said, so did I. The only difference is you were just better than I was. That's all. But I rounded around with 12 different organizations and went there and through all the different avenues. So I may have learned because I had to. But you learn from everybody. Go back to your line. You learned that I said, hey, I got a problem with the analytical number. Or I already got on this computer. Or you saw the guy before. Now, he might get into his jargon. I said, listen, you're talking to me, time out. Listen, I don't even got a cigarette in my mouth. You get back to my level. What do you mean with that? Now, he'll help me too. We both help each other. But unfortunately, what this game has done, it's about money and everything else in every other sport. Some things are good to change, but some things are not. And for me, it's going to take me a long time to go back. I'll go and get my lawn chair, and I'll sit to where it used to be to watch the kids play. With nobody around me. I can talk to myself. I'll look better anyway. But to see and watch kids play the way it used to be, if they still want to play. But I'll also say this, if you don't want to play, don't waste your dad and mom's money. Don't do it. Do your soccer. Do your lacrosse. You've got options. Don't just do it because we put so much money in the RBI program, and I know the founder, John Young, who I work with with the Marlins. All the money in the world. I'm not blaming the brothers. I'd rather play hoops. I'd rather play football. Because, you got to get them to the park. You got to get them to play the game. Baseball's not just something you say, well, you got to throw it. You got to hit it. You got to run it. Basketball, we all can shoot. We all can run. We all go for the passes. I don't blame them. I don't blame anybody. But you got to try to have people who want to play and enjoy the game. We've lost that. And you know what's just like a good bar or good restaurant? When you lose the people, it's hard to get them back. Because the baby boomers are starting to die off now. And you got your corporate America world that sits in the suites and goes for 5 innings, which I could do now, and go home. But it's different than saying, I'm not leaving this game, it's 4-4. I mean, the worst people we have, and I say this in a baseball school thing, which, like Lancelotti used to say, I don't know who owns this school, you or me. Because I would do it, in the off season, in the wintertime before I left. I would say it in front of the parents too. I remember the rolling eyes stuff and everything else. I said, Will George always told me, he still scouts with the Rockies today. And he said, how do you teach those turds? I said, to make them the best turd. As long as you enjoy to play, I'll give you the high five. Do you feel the love in the sky? I can do all that stuff still at my age. But you roll your eyes and you're just doing it for the sake, and I said it one time, the parents were over there and said, are you doing it for you or are you doing it for them? Because I really don't give a crap. But don't waste my time and your time and their money. So there's a lot of people goes, oh my God. It is with city. I don't know who's running the school. I said, well, I'll never see that kid.
Would you do another thing?
Shoot.
There's another crowd someplace where you take this same evening, your same part of it, and go to another crowd.
Me?
It's just fabulous.
Oh, God, another crowd?
It's just
Do I have to show balance right there? Go down the hill.
It's been fabulous having you here.
With that lead in from the Mr. Baseball, it's so glad to have Bill Scherrer here. Let's give him a big hand.
Very nice.
All right, everybody look this way. Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Now, I'd love to talk to you all, but I'm smoking now. I have no more time.
That's why we got him to sign earlier.